Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Nathan Baird, Andrew Gillis. And this is day 2 of our ranking the Ohio State's best 15 players. We did offense on Thursday. On Friday, we will be doing the defense. The offense sparked a spicy conversation about the quarterbacks that I'm not sure I was anticipating, but it was fun. I think this one's going to get even more spicier. The vote from the texters, I sent out on Thursday. I sent out the survey at like 10:30 in the morning, and I was watching it routinely throughout the day. And first place votes became a a competition for the next 6 hours after that. As we're recording this here around 3:30, it was very, very close. Nathan, I'm going to let you go first. Andrew got to go first with the offense. Nathan, I'm going to allow you to go first. Who are you picking with your top defensive player on Ohio State's roster in 2023?
Well, I actually think this might be less spicy because I think there's just so many possible options. And I can think of a good handful of guys who I don't know if there's a wrong answer. I don't know that there's also not a consensus clear runaway number one the way there is on offense. So I don't know. We'll see how this goes. But if you're giving me the first pick, I'll take JT Tuimoloau as my number one pick. And there's just so many candidates. And I think, like I said, you could make a case for any of these guys. But the number one guy the guy who I think is just the best overall football player, possibly the highest skilled football player relative to his position especially, I think is JT Tuimoloau. And the one with maybe has demonstrated the highest ceiling in a real way. I know it was just the one game really, but it shows it gives you a window into what a sustained performance like him could be for this third year. I think it's asking a lot, but I think he also is motivated a lot. So we'll see what 2023 has in store. But from a crowded group that I could take number one, that's who I'm going to take.
Andrew, where was JT on your list?
JT was second. I kind of flip-flop between first and second. But yeah, JT was up there for me too. I don't think that's necessarily a controversial pick. I think Nathan's right. There can be spice here because you can, there's a lot of different answers, but I think you could also, kind of argue it the other way. Like Nathan was saying, I'm not going to argue JT first. I had a hard time putting him first or second. So
JT was first with the Texans as well. I had him number one as well. His weighted rank was 2.07, which is the highest of anybody. He got 41.4% of the first place votes. 9 different guys on defense got a first place vote. He got 41.4% of them. Here's the deal. JT had been number one for about the last hour leading up to us recording this, but he was not leading in first place votes. That became a fun game. He actually had 2 more first place votes than the guy who finished with the second most first place votes, which, Andrew, you're going second. Let's see if you're taking this guy.
Second for me was Tommy Eichenberg.
Who's number one on your list? That's what you're picking, right? Is that
Tommy
Eichenberg? Tommy Eichenberg is number one.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, I had that flipped. So I would have taken Eichenberg first if I went. You're talking about a guy who I think he was 120 tackles last year. He was up there in snaps, first team All Big Ten. You're talking about a guy who's going to be kind of on every award list, or he should be on every award list kind of for his position this year. I think the upside of JT is higher, as Nathan kind of alluded to, but also Tommy Eichenberg is one of the best linebackers in the country. His value, I think, is incredibly important to not only like the defense, but Ohio State as a whole. So I would have went with Tommy first. Again, I could be persuaded. I'm not necessarily beholden to first or second. I didn't really have too much of a preference, but I think Eichenberg here is fair. I think he would have been first off the board for me, but second off the board is just as fair.
He was second for me as well, and he was second for the Texters. His weighted rank score was 2.44. But here's what got so interesting here is Tommy Eichenberg was second overall, but he did not have the most second place votes. He had 40.5% of the first place votes. And remember, JT had 41.4%. That's how close you're talking there. Where JT ran away and where the gap with the weighted rank score started to show up was JT Tuimoloau got 36.7% of the second place votes. Tommy Eichenberg only got 25.7% of the second place votes. So JT led in both first and second place votes when she started to pull away there, while Tommy, he's just like his cumulative got him. There's a gap. After 2.07 and 2.44, there's a 2-point gap between 2 and 3, who shows up third for the Texters. He was second for me as well. And I this could have gone back and forth. I think who you decided on between those two was a conversation of known production, and you know what Tommy Eichenberg's going to be this year. He's going to be at bare minimum probably second team All-American level versus potential upside with JT Tuimoloau, where I keep saying it. If he's 85, 80, 75% of what he was in the Penn State game every single week, that's an All-American potential top 15 draft pick. Any shock there that those are the top two consensus guys from both ourselves and the Texers?
No, because I actually had Eichenberg third on my list, but I don't consider that a shock that he was second. And I think it's a choice between maybe the highest ceiling, although I think that's maybe arguable, but in other ways not, because of the position we're talking about with JT Tuimoloau, and the highest floor, which is Eichenberg, which I think you're right. Like it's just a level of performance that you assume from him day in and day out, the steadiness, the impact. It even through the Tommy No Thumbs experience last year, he still performed. He was still a reliable guy who led this defense, and you would expect nothing less than that in the year ahead too. So I totally get the case why he would be getting even so many first place votes.
Andrew, any shock from you that these are top two?
No, I mean, when I set out, I kind of did, my big board again. I looked at this and I went, okay, these are my two, and then let's figure out the other 13. That was frankly the way that I approached it, and I didn't think it was, I deliberated between first and second. I didn't deliberate that they were first or second.
So I have the third pick. And I was going to take this guy anyway at third, but the Texans also agreed. There was a clear 1 and 2, not a clear order at the entire time, but over time there was a clear number 3. And there was a gap between him and number 2, and there was a gap between him and number 4. And that's my call. It's the question with him is just simply, and Nathan, you're shaking your head. I'm assuming that's who you had second.
Correct.
The question with him is he healthy? And if he's healthy and he's doing whatever the thing he was doing the first 6 weeks of the year before he stopped being healthy, imagine that when it's 12 weeks of 85% healthy, pairing that with regardless of what JT does, that's a game wrecker. We talk about it all the time, the 2.5 sacks and 7 snaps. He's not going to be that every single week. But from the Notre Dame game on to he got those shoulder injuries, he was the closest thing they had to a habitual game wrecker on that defensive line in a way that we really haven't seen on the interior from Ohio State.
Yeah, we just recorded for Monday, actually, the next Market Down Monday. We got ahead on that, and we are having a conversation about how many plays away, or maybe it's just one, that Ohio State is from being the people we're talking about, whether they would be repeating right now. And this isn't a play, but I think you can throw, and it's not completely fair, every team has injuries, but like if Mike Hall had been healthy, everything else is equal. You still lose Marvin Harrison Jr., you still lose Cade Stover, the running backs are still beat up, but you get healthy Mike Hall who can do the things he was doing in the first weeks of the year. Does that make one play of difference in the national championship game? Do you sack Stetson Bennett or make a big TFL that changes the complexion of a drive that turned into a touchdown for Georgia? Like, we'll never know. But I would throw that up there because he was just so good early last year, and it looked and felt special. It didn't just look and feel good. It looked and felt special. So if that wasn't just a flash in the pan, if it was real, and if he can get it back this year in concert with what else they have going on at defensive end, and now throwing Tywone Malone in there and other things, it's part of the reasons why we've talked a lot about the defensive line in preseason camp and the way this is developed and how that defensive line could maybe be. Talk all you want about the quarterbacks, talk all you want about Marvin Harrison Jr., talk all you want about the secondary. This defensive line could be why Ohio State does or doesn't win a national championship.
Andrew, where'd you have Mike Hall?
I had him third. I had him up there too. I think, I picked Eichenberg first because of not stability might be the wrong word. There's the comfort in kind of knowing what you were going to get from him. But Mike Hall, I think the upside there for me was like, all right, you take Mike Hall, I kind of like what Nathan was saying. If you take Hall, I just feel really good about what he could be this year. Especially with, and depending on, where I kind of pick, you're going to see kind of where I have some of these defensive linemen. I think that this defensive line can be really, really special. So, I think Mike Hall is going to be a big part of that. And I think he's going to kind of be benefited by some of the other guys there. So I think third was fair for Hall.
So Hall's weighted rank score was 4.55. He had the most most third place votes with 23.3. He got 8 first place votes. So he had 14.3% of the second place votes. He also had the most fourth place votes by literally 1 vote. He had 19% of the fourth place votes, but by literally 1 vote, he had the most. And he was also in the conversation for the fifth most votes. For fifth place votes, 14.3. So we're into the number 4 pick, Nathan, where you're going to go. This is where it starts it's almost grouped. There's the 2 clear number 1, top 2 guys, and then there's a gap, and then there's Mike Hall sitting alone. And then in this 4 through 6 range, there's 3 guys who are very much bunched together. And then the 7 and 8 guys are bunched together. And then 9 through like 13 are all kind of bunched up together as well. So this can, now that we've gotten those top 3 guys out the way, this can go pretty much anywhere. Nathan, where did you go with number 4?
So I have a 4 through 6 as well that are kind of a cluster, and I was really struggling to how I wanted to put them in order because they're all secondary players. And I went back and forth about how much of a leap to take here, because there's one of them is like the most veteran and most proven, and the other one is maybe the most had the most solid year last year, and then the other one is the up and coming one. And we don't want to get, I guess, too far down the line there before they actually get on the field and prove some things. So I'm going to take Lathan Ransom here. And that, if I had given myself this assignment a year ago, I might have thought that was too high, or just even coming out of last year. Like, is Lathan Ransom the 4th best player on this defense? But when you start to talk about things like actually being a playmaker and what value that has, then you start to talk about him a lot. Like, going in and doing the things he did last year as a special teams player, I think that sort of mindset and that skill set can translate to being the bandit in a defense like this, and being a guy at the back end of a defense. If you've got you can start to really do a projection here. If you have a defensive line that takes a jump in terms of being disruptive, getting in quarterbacks' faces, causing bad throws, causing tipped passes, well, who's going to benefit from that? I would say a guy playing strong safety has a chance to really benefit from that, especially if it's a guy with this kind of background as being a playmaker. And just really intrigued by him and what he can be now with a fully healthy offseason of runway behind him. And I had to break the tie somehow, and I just came up, Lathan Ransom will be my pick here.
He was 4th for me as well. He was 7th for the Texters, though. 7.97 was his weighted rank score. And I don't think either person is wrong. It's dependent. I'm with you. I think I keep saying it, they're going to use him as a weapon. I think he can be in the safety room what Tommy Eichenberg is in the linebacker room in terms of how they view him and how they use him. Does he have the most upside of the people in his room? Probably not. But he'll get used in a way that he is clearly an all Big Ten level player. And he had like 70 plus tackles last year. He'll probably be in that range this year. And I think I think we've talked so much about some of these young guys who might be coming that we're not talking about Lathan Ransom enough, which is kind of what happened with Tommy Eichenberg. We were talking about Steel Chambers. We were talking about Cody Simon. We were talking about CJ Hicks. And it's like, hey, Jim Knowles is telling us, hey, Tommy, we like Tommy Eichenberg now. We like him a lot. And then we saw why. I think the same thing is happening with Lathan, where we're talking about all these other guys. And it's like, wait a minute. This is still the top dog in the room. And I think he might spend the year telling us why. So I get why he's seventh from the Texans, but I'm with you. He was fourth on my list as well. Andrew, where was Lathan Ransom on your list?
He was fifth. So kind of the same ballpark. I was kind of in the same. Funny enough, I actually 4 through 6. I also had 3 secondary players. I was looking at this list and I couldn't make heads or tails of it. I really kind of had a hard time picking, who was going to be 4. I kind of had an idea who was going to be 6th, but I really kind of had a hard time picking 4 or 5. I leaned upside here, which is who I went with 4th. But for 5th, I just thought that kind of Ransom is in that group of players on my list. So 5th, I think you're kind of right around the same ballpark.
Ransom did get one first place vote as well. Andrew, I mean, so far, it's like somebody gets picked and you're like, yeah, but he was right under the guy I would have picked in that situation. We're here again. Who was 4th on your list, but 5th on this draft board?
Denzel Burke. I when I looked at kind of why I picked him 4th and why I would have put him here, I think the upside kind of going into his 3rd year, I think is going to be important. You got, freshman All-American, and then you got, I think it was honorable mention last year, Big Ten. Like, you have that, and it's just like, if you can put that together, if you can put kind of some of the physical traits together, you're going into a 3rd year now, you can put all that together, you're going to be, a pretty good player. And I think that if you can kind of find that consistency, you're going to feel really good about kind of locking down one half of the field with Denzel Burke. So yeah, I like Burke here. I think he's kind of in that cluster, like Nathan said. I just had him a little bit higher, but I think that kind of in this group, I think it's kind of hard to go wrong. So Denzel was the choice for me here.
Nathan, Andrew takes Denzel Burke 5th. He was 6th for the Texans with a rated rank of 5.71. He got 5 first place votes as well, so he was one of those guys in that cluster. Where was Denzel Burke for you on this list?
6th on my list, and he's in this weird sort of purgatory where you have to acknowledge what he means to this program. You have to acknowledge the way that Jim Knowles talks about him, and I think that other players on this team talk about him. But he is coming off of a rough year last year, and I'm still waiting for the upside to show up in relation to how we talk about him, maybe is, I guess, the best way to say it. And it's not me saying I don't think he's a good football player. It's just that I feel it a little bit more from the people ahead of him, but I also am completely prepared for that to change this year. That this year is the year where more of that can show up. That last year was supposed to have been. It's not his fault. Like, last year was supposed to have been, like, what happened for him as a freshman was impressive. Like, to come in, small background as a cornerback, get thrown to the fire, and then save them at that position for an entire season. Like, that was a great achievement. And what was supposed to happen was him to take that foundation and build on it, and then be more like that, again, with the esteem of the way that we talk about him. And then the injuries just didn't let that happen. From the preseason through what happened with his hand, like, it just never. He was, I thought, though, playing better at the end of the year, and I thought that was important. That his confidence started to come back, but more than that, the skills just started to show up again, and he didn't look as, frankly, lost as he did at times early in the year when it was later in the year. And I think all those things are good signs for him to be someone who, and you already hear it as far as like that. Seven Banks went through this. Like, anytime you're like a returning starter in the secondary at Ohio State, and it's your time to go get drafted, all of a sudden you're a first rounder, and it's really lazy. I understand how it happens, but he's the one that I like. If I see those things, those guesses on where he could go, I don't think it's as crazy. I think that the underlying performance is there. And now if he's healthy and stays healthy, I think it'll show up more this year.
He finished sixth for the Texans, but he actually had the most fifth place votes with 23.3% of those votes. It's so jumbled up in this middle here that it's going to be funny. It's how they ended up, placing out here. He was seventh for me. And I have always operated in this space of what if Denzel Burke is not their best cornerback? And I don't think that's a bad thing if we get to the end of the year and he's their third best cornerback, because there's two other dudes, one of which we don't know about, but people in that program swear up and down he's a dude. And we'll talk about him when he shows up on this list here, when somebody picks him. But I've just always operated in that capacity of like, we might get to an end of the year and Denzel's third, which is a really good cornerback room, while the two other dudes I have ahead of him in my fifth and sixth spots, I'm there. I've heard enough good things about them this offseason that I'm ready to put them in a conversation like that. I'll reveal one of those guys when we come back here from the break, but that's our top five: JT Tuimoloau, Tommy Eichenberg, Mike Hall, Lathan Ransom, and Denzel Burke. And when we come back, I'll reveal who I'm taking with the sixth pick.